Good evening. This is the Chicago Computer Society Linux Special Interest Group 2. And on January the 24th, and we're going to have an ambitious evening based on the agenda in my handout. Most of the handout and most of what's on the agenda is there as a form. Oh, hang on a minute. I got a sudden video issue like Dennis has had. I don't know what that's about. But anyway, uh, generally speaking, the purpose of that is discussion points to try and get some of you to start getting active in Linux. I'm doing more and more in my Linux besides Windows, and I've got a Linux laptop. It used to be Chromebook. It's only got 2 gigs of memory. It only has the 16 gigabyte internal SSD. Actually, it's probably an eMMC, solid state memory. What the heck's going on? Now all of a sudden I've got the problem Dennis has got. Anyway, bottom line is the problem is I've got at least 8, 9 windows in Chromium browser open with multiple tabs. Only one of them's got 2 tabs. Everything else is much higher. One of them's got over 65 tabs. And I've squeezed that out into, I don't know what's happening right now with video. But anyway, bottom line, I have techniques on Chromebooks itself, which is I only found out lately, besides knowing it, Chrome OS is a Linux. It's Gentoo Linux, and I didn't know that before. Boy, and I rebooted the computer too. So I don't know what's happening. Something's stealing some of my video capability. At any rate, so tonight we have in the tips area a lot of stuff, and I want to also ask on the November 29th meeting, I gave you a document and I called it homework. How many of you did any homework? Well, I don't know of any way of learning any foreign operating system just sitting there doing nothing. You have to invest the time and effort to learn some of the stuff. I gave you a lot of references there. Tonight is a lot of references too, and it means that you are expected to go through some of that stuff in order to be able to start learning some of the capabilities of Linux. And if you don't, it raises the question, why are you here? I have to ask the question because it makes no sense for you to show up at a meeting about something and you're not doing anything about it, or you're not doing anything with the efforts I make in providing you research material, and that's unfortunate. But the thing is, there's no pill, there's no injectable to transfer mine or anybody else's knowledge to you. never has been, and I seriously doubt it ever will be. So the question is, why aren't you doing something to learn this stuff? There's a number of different ways in which you can learn a lot of this stuff. And one of them is downloading a, a distro, ISO, using Rufus or Etcher as two ways of getting it onto a flash drive. And it gives you the ability to be able to do a test environment. You can bang away on it. If you do something to screw it up, who cares? Just take the ISO image you already downloaded and load it back onto the flash drive. It'll be just like the first time you brought it up. That's the bottom line. Now, there was also online resources. One of them was distrotest.net. It appears it's gone bye-bye. That's unfortunate, but I have sources that I've even provided APCG, John Kennedy, to be able to have alternate online sites. And there, you just have any running computer. I don't care what it is. That's up to you. But generally speaking, once you have a distro location for running it live, it goes right through your browser. So you just bring up a browser, you open up a new tab, you put in a URL to a site, you follow the login procedures, you select your version of Linux that you're interested in, and you have a live environment to bang around in and do no damage. But it's a learning process. If you don't invest the time and effort, I'm sorry, but I can't give you a pill or anything else in that in order to get you moving on it. If you're a person that is adverse to failure, excuse me, since you were born, and I said born, you have a case where all learning process is based on failure. Figuring out why you failed to try and avert that disaster and be able to eventually have good success. Linux is a good example. If you don't know what Linux is, you come from the Windows or Mac world where it's kind of like baby food and you're a child, really. But generally speaking, in Linux, most of this to give you the freedom of choice and how you do it is a DIY. Do it yourself. And you're going to have failures. There is no way around it. And it's a learning point when you have the failure. What did I do wrong? Did I do something I shouldn't have done? Okay. You learn from it. And then you rebuild the stuff and get it back in position. Bob brought up that he wants to get up to the current version of Mint, and that's fine. He's going to do a backup before he does it. I have a backup in the form of having test versions I can blow away. If something bad happens to them, so what? I just rebuild it and then I go on from there. Though I do have some backups of that environment. Now, normally, for learning purposes, you can get away in some systems as little as 16 gigabytes. In some systems, 32. And if you get up to 64 gigabytes on a drive, you got lots of room to spare because you're not using it for production. You are using it as a learning tool and a learning environment. And if you have a backup of a successfully set up system, that's perfect too. No problem about that. But you don't need big drives. You aren't using the Linux probably in any kind of real productive like environment except for Bob and myself. I don't know about Jeff, you or Peter, where you're at. So I can't say for certain. You guys are at least going beyond sitting on the fence. So you have a situation where you got to dip your toes in the water and get dirty to learn this stuff. There's no way of telling you how to do it, and you're going to know everything about it right then and there, and then go do it. It doesn't happen. It really doesn't happen. So that's my soapbox. Now, I'm gonna, man, this video is driving me nuts, and this is the first time this has happened on my end. I don't know if you guys can see it, but I sure can.
At the upper edge of your screen, you're flashing by.
Yeah, and then you look like you're moving at lightning speed. Dennis has had the same problem on past several meetings he's attended outside of this particular group. But there's something screwy going on here that I haven't seen before.
Oh, there's Dennis with his flashing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It must be catching.
It flashes on my Samsung 8.1, but it works fine on the Chromebook over here.
Yeah, and it varies on the resources.
And I just did reboot this thing.
Yeah.
An hour before the meeting, so
I didn't even. It wasn't even an hour before the meeting I did booted mine. I'm gonna try something. I don't know how well this will work. Hang with. Yeah. Well, I switched the whole thing to a different machine.
It's coming in loud and clear now.
No problems.
And
stable. You want to bet? Anyway, hang on one second here while I try to find my head. I lost it. Okay. Now, okay. Since none of you did the, hang on one second. Sorry about that.
Now you got an echo.
Hello. Okay. Do you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, at least that part worked. I had to change the headset too, to the other machine. All right. At any rate, since you didn't do any homework, I assume I'm not going to get much of anything out of any of you in the way of tips. So I did my usual, and I listed 5 things here. Xkill, excuse me, is one of the first items. What the hell is it? If any of you on Windows have ever had a application or a window that you tried to X out of to close it, or you used the application's ability to close the program, that's fine. But if it didn't close down, what did you do? The answer on Windows is hold down the Alt key and hit the F4 key. As long as the program that won't close is the one on top, that's called the active program, you use Alt F4 and it will close that program. If it can't close the program, you're likely going to have to be closing down your other programs and rebooting the computer, because it is in a state that it will refuse to close. But Alt F4 does a pretty darn good job. Well, I also had a problem with the Linux over the last few weeks. I've had a few instances where the program would freeze up. It's still got a window there. So how do you get rid of it? Well, for a while, the first thing that came to mind, because I don't know of an Alt F4, I took and basically shut down everything else properly, and then I rebooted the computer. That solved the problem until it happened again. By the 3rd time, I says, this is nuts. So I started looking up stuff. And it turns out, especially Mint, already has it built in. Most of the others do too, but I'll say Mint looks a little more formal than the other, in that F3 key will give you the equivalent of an Alt F4, but not in the same fashion. What it does instead, it takes the cursor pointer that you have and turns it into an X. You move the X to the title bar of the offending program you want to close down and click it. That's it. It blows it away. It stops the process. And so that's the equivalent of being able to do an Alt F4 in Windows on a Linux distro. In Linux Mint, I have a way of finding out what it is. I can add my own shortcuts. This is very important on converted Chromebooks, because I ran into headaches with that. And I had to create the equivalent of the F3. On mine, the right Alt key next to the space bar becomes the equivalent of an FN key on a normal Windows PC laptop. So the end result is I have to hold down that key and then hit what's called the refresh button, which is the equivalent of an F3. So it's those two keys, does the same function, gives me the ability to get an X on as my cursor, put it at the title bar of the window that's the offender, click it, problem solved. There are other keys like this, and you can make some if you need to. It's not that hard, but I'm not going to cover that in this meeting. That might be a future topic to cover. The next topic area is swap area. There are two types of swap areas. There's a swap file. If you do the simple, easy install of a Linux distro, creating only a single partition like Windows and Mac, it will be using a swap file. Now, some people like it because they can, like in Windows, adjust the size up or down to meet their needs. But Linux doesn't use the swap file much unless you have very small memory, like 4 gigs or 2 gigs, like on my converted Chromebooks. Then you start using the swap file more. But when you got above 4 gigabytes in the machine, you don't have too much need for the swap file, period. I, on the other hand, prefer using a swap partition. There is a small penalty on a swap file that some people just, they don't care about the small performance hit. But in a swap partition in Linux that I use, the only argument is, where do you install that partition on your drive layout? Some say it should be the first partition. Some say it's the last partition. Some might have it somewhere in the middle. With an SSD, I don't think it matters much. On a spinning hard drive, it will make a difference, and you might want to have it as the first partition. Now, in addition to that, I think as long as you're over 4 gigs of memory, I would only have a very small swap partition, probably no more than 3 gigabytes. And you'll be lucky to use a third of that space at any given point in time, unless you get super active on using Linux in compared to Windows. So that's a tip area. Htop. All Linux distributions that I'm aware of come with what's called Top. And Top is a displaying of your running processes. Htop does a little bit better job. It's a little easier to deal with, and it gives you the ability to find out what your resource hogs are. You can even add in a feature to limit how much processing power those hogs use on your system. But it's kind of a case where you got to do your homework a little bit. And I've got articles that are in the handout about all these topic areas. Bob, you got your hand up.
Yeah, just getting back to swap. There's one other reason why you might want to have a fairly large swap partition, and it's only if you are going to use Hibernate. To use Hibernate in Linux, you have to have a swap partition equal about to your RAM.
Well, that's true in Windows and probably on Mac too, but so far on Linux, I've decided not to use Hibernate. I just use the suspend feature or sleep feature, if you will. And then when I want to go back to it, in some cases, I just hit the space bar once and it comes back to life. Or in some instances, if it's been quite a while, I have to press the power button, then it'll come up, or you hit the space bar then and it comes to life. So
Yeah.
I haven't needed to hibernate.
Yeah, it used to be that when we had all the old BIOS post and all that, if you tried to boot up, it would take a long time to happen. And
Yeah.
if you came back from hibernate, it would be much quicker.
Yes.
That's no longer as much of an issue. The last time I used it was probably on my 2015 Toshiba satellite.
Yeah, and if you still use a spinning hard drive, you might want to consider the hibernate. But understand, hibernate is not a perfect solution as far as things go. They can be of help, but you pay in free real estate on your drive. So that's another issue that you have to consider. Now, the next item I have on the tips area is bottles. And I have in parentheses Alt PlayonLinux. What are these about? Bottles is a program that I'm going to call a polished version of a control program over Wine. Wine is used as the foundation for running Windows programs on a Linux box. Pardon you, Peter. Anyway,
Sorry.
the best thing if you're going to insist on running Windows applications on a Linux is to have a virtual machine. Load up Windows. It's going to require you to have a license for that virtual environment. Once you have that up, you are running Windows. So you can run any Windows programs you want. You just load them into the Windows environment and run them, just like you do on a straight machine. The Wine gives you the ability, it's an emulator of Windows that tries to run as much software as possible. They have bronze, silver, gold, and platinum level on various programs. When you have platinum, odds are it runs exactly like it did on Windows. And gold, you might have little minor nuisances that don't work quite right. Silver, you'll have more problems, and bronze, you're lucky if it runs and gets you what you want to do. The bad part about Wine by itself is that it is hard for most people to configure properly in order to be able to run their programs successfully. And you are having to do this per Windows program you want to install and run. Bottles tries to give you an easy graphical interface to Wine for doing that configuration. I am going to be experimenting with it on a different machine. It's a laptop. On this machine here, I'm doing it just the KVM, which is a virtual machine. And eventually I may cross-pollinate, but I've got some other issues I got to still address. But generally speaking, Bottles gives you a way of running the programs. PlayonLinux is the same kind of concept. It's a different package by different developers. PlayonLinux used to have PlayonLinux.com website. If you stick in PlayonLinux.com, you're going to get nothing. It moved to GitHub. So, and I haven't gone out there directly yet, and I don't have a URL I can give you, but Bottles you have to go up, PlayonLinux. You can get the same code, but it's out on GitHub, and you can then use it. Some think PlayonLinux is a little easier than Bottles, but for me, the jury's still out, and I don't know my time-wise how soon I'll be able to do a more in-depth on Bottles or PlayonLinux. So I'm just letting you know about that. VLC to record video. This was something I stumbled across in December. I haven't used it much, frankly, but generally speaking, if you got VLC on your computer, there's a hidden way of using VLC to record the video, like I'm doing with the meeting right now with a different piece of software. So this is all stuff that I'm covering inside of my document that'll be put in the chat. I'm also stating that up front, the first thing I do is I go to Software Manager for any of these programs, and I download from there. If I can't find them there, I'll bring up the Synaptics package. And the court of last result, I go to the terminal program, do a sudo app install and whatever the name of the program is, and see if I can get it there. There have been cases where all three of them failed, and I had to find an alternate method. In October or November, I brought up power management for anybody running Linux on a laptop. There is auto -CPU freak, FREQ. And it works on some systems, but I would say they're more modern systems. The prior package is TLP. TLP in Mint via the software manager will show you 3 entries. So you have to install all 3 of them. One of them is TLP when it's installed -UI. That's the graphical user interface. And you got a lot of features there to go through. You may have to do some searching on the internet to understand all the features and what you want to set. That could be a topic in the future too. But on a few of my Linux laptops, including Xubuntu, I could only get 2 of the 3 modules. Well, I found an article in Linux Uprising, and it gives you 3 terminal commands to load in a PPA package from a Ubuntu source, and it works. So I now have the graphical interface there, so I can adjust TLP. Power management is required on laptops. Otherwise, if you take and have a power outage, or you remove the AC adapter in a laptop, it's going to eat up your battery in probably under an hour. And that's not a joke. It's amazing. Even on Chromebooks, which are noted for sipping power, you might only have a couple hours at best runtime without power management. And power management is really the TLP for older systems, auto-CPU freak for more modern systems. These are some of the tips that I'm giving out. You will get the data, but if you don't start reading the articles and try and follow along with it, it's a waste of time. Bob?
Okay, getting back to Xubuntu and power management.
Mhm,
I run Xubuntu on a Chromebook,
mhm.
and I am able, with the tools that are now in the current version of Xubuntu, 2204, I am able to place an icon on one of the panels that is a little battery icon. I right click on that. I can control screen brightness, which really impacts your battery life. And I
Yes.
can control when it will dim, when it will cut out, when it will go to screensaver, and
Yes.
what happens when I come back.
I have the power management too, but it's next to nothing compared to TLP. I don't have TLP on this computer here
Mhm.
because it's a desktop.
Yeah.
And power management's all about managing a battery, which is only for portable devices like a laptop. So I can't demonstrate that here. I would have to bring up one of these other computers and connect it into the conference to be able to show you what I'm talking about. But
Yeah.
there is something that preceded TLP, but I don't remember what it was. It's more like the power management you've seen in Xubuntu as an example. And so it's on a minimum edge. Screen brightness on laptops is a hog by itself. Add in certain applications that you're wanting to run, and they become big battery eaters. But there is a way of using some tools you have to load in that you can find the process that's eating up all the power out of the battery, and it's called limit CPU or CPU dash limit, something like that. I've got the information, but I didn't include that in my doc. And it allows you to say, okay, instead of 100% of utilization of power and hogging up the CPU resources, you are able to take and say, oh, I only want it to run at 50% or 75%, something like that. And until you close that program, that limiting is in effect. But once you close the program, it goes away. And the next time you run the program, you'd have to do the same thing over and over again. It's not a permanent restrictor. So it depends upon what your needs are. So that gets us down into the meat of the meeting, unless some of you have additional questions or comments at this point. Hearing none, I'm going to try and share the screen a little bit. I'm going to the desktop here, and I have, this is the doc there that you'll get a copy of, and this is another article that I have to have. But you go to your start button, or whatever you want to call this icon in the corner, and you want to in the search bar up here where the cursor's already at, and some versions of Linux, the search bar is at the bottom. Type in SYSTEM space REPORTS, and there it is. Click it. Now, mine says I'm ready for Vera version 21.1. If you do not see this option, it's likely that your version of Linux has updates you have not applied yet. So you've got to get it up to date and bring this back up again. It will give you the option. So it's relatively easy. I've gone through it on a few machines. I left it off a couple of machines just for the purpose of this meeting as an issue, because some of you might be aware that there was a new version. And this is how you get it and update it quite easily. This is like old Mint 20 when it went to 20.1. And then it eventually went to 20.2, 20.3. All of them worked this way to update them. But when it went from 20.3 to 21, they had to have a major script do a lot of the work for you, but they made it the easiest update to a major upgrade I have ever seen in Linux. And I hope more people adopt it. I think Debian is looking seriously at doing it. I don't know about any of the versions of Ubuntu having such an adoption. If they do, great. If they don't do it, I think they're hurting themselves. I'm not going to go through the update here. All you have to do is click it. It'll download what it needs. It will probably ask you, because of a kernel update, these are extra things you need. You click on continue. It'll ask you for your password. You put in the password, and it does everything else. When you're done, reboot the computer, and you're on 21.1. It's that simple. So I hope this answers Wayne's question and anybody else that was looking to do an update to this. Now, you can take Bob Premick's advice and do a thorough image backup before doing it. When you went from 20.3 to 21, I recommended that wholeheartedly. But in testing it out, at least for my systems, I consider these more minor updates when they're going like from 21.0 to 21.1, eventually 21.2, and maybe a 21.3 as more minor updates. I have never had an experience yet where they screwed up my system. And I test with something that if I screw up because I didn't back up, I don't care. I just rebuild it either from a backup or I do it from scratch. Now, I want to preface this. I normally on meetings would use this disk here. It's a 32 gigabyte SSD running Windows Mint 21 now 0.1. I tested it with it without doing a backup because this is a test version. It's for learning purposes. That's all its purpose is to be able to experiment. And if need be, I lose it. Okay. If worse comes to worse, I rebuild it from scratch, or I take and I manage to have a backup. I restore the backup and go on with life from there. Not a big deal to me. Your mileage will vary. That's why I say when you're learning, you can use small drives for the purposes of experimenting. And when you fail, you just rebuild it or restore a backup if you made a backup copy. In which case, okay, so what? You lost a little time. Hopefully you learn from the mistake that caused you to lose the system in the first place. That's what it's all about. And I don't know how to emphasize that in any other way. Now, the system I'm on right now, I can't show you the drive, but I have a drive much like the one I just showed you. It's 250 gigabytes. I cloned that test environment onto that. Then I use gparted to increase root directory and my home directory a little bit, not a lot, but I did some. But to do that, there's another trick that I didn't list up there at the top of the agenda. And that is the complaint that some people use a Linux swap file versus a Linux partition. A Linux partition is unformatted, first off. Second, it does not allow resizing. Third, you cannot move it to make space in front or in back of it. What you have to do is delete it, period. Then after you do all your other gyrations you plan to do on your drive in your partitions, that's fine. You create a new swap file to the size you want, and that's it. Because you're going to have to reboot anyhow before you use the Linux system. And that's as easy as I can make it for anybody. Just blow away that swap partition and then remake it as one of the last things you do in the changes you're making. I also made a, it's currently an empty partition. I have to figure out how to move some things out of the root or home directory into the empty area and point to them properly. But it's not happening right now. It's one of these problems that I've got to research in order to be able to achieve it. I guarantee you I'll find the answer somewhere. And once I've done that, I will be a happy camper. I'm doing something very similar on another machine that I put a 120 gigabyte drive in to make a work area like I am on this 250. And it's for the purposes of playing with bottles to try out running Windows programs on that Linux box with bottles. I may also install PlayonLinux and see what the differences between bottles and PlayonLinux is. This will be stuff for down the road. So the bottom line is, you guys that don't have a running Linux, you got to get off the dime. You're going to have to do something, either use, download the ISO, get it transferred on to a flash drive properly, and boot your computer from that flash drive to give you a play environment. Or you go to one of the resources I give you for using your browser to an online site and play with your distro there and learn how to use the Linux. When you're ready, my suggestion is getting the small SSD to physically load Linux on. If you load it up even as one partition, that's okay as a beginning learning point. The next step after that is learning how to reinstall it using a root partition, a home partition, and a swap partition minimum. You may also need a boot partition or a UEFI partition, and those are next to nothing in size. 500 megabytes is more than adequate. In either case, you got to have something live you can bang around with. If once you get it initially set up, start making an image backup. Once you got an image backup, if you really screw up bad, restore the backup. And once you got the restoration, learn from the mistake you think you made, and don't do it again. But keep on experimenting. This is the only way you're going to learn how to use the tool. The tool is the computer with an operating system. Whether it's Windows, Mac, or Linux, really doesn't matter at this point in time. You've got to have something you can experiment with in any spare time you can make. And that varies person to person. We all have our lives. We have things we got to do when we're not asleep. If you can't find time during the waking hours, shorten your sleep. What the heck you got to lose? You're wasting a third of your every day sleeping. So give up a little bit of the sleep and use it for learning. It's a real thing. But, and trust me, they do that in college, and some high school students do too. That's why they get good grades, they get scholarships, etc. Hey, I'll grant you we're older and we tire more easily, but still, it's there. Peter, did you have something to say?
Yeah, this is a question for both you and Bob.
Not allowed.
What? Not allowed?
Right.
Okay, so here it is. Back when we first started this, the approximate month, because I've got an all-in-one box over here that's got a different distro of Linux on there, and I want to blow it away, and I want to go back to the beginning of this and get the instructions to create a Mint distro on that box.
It's not really a big deal.
I understand it's not a big deal, but if I know the approximate month, I can go and replay
It was July.
July of last year.
Yep.
Okay.
And if that doesn't work out for you, email me. I've got the video. I can put it back up where you can access it. And that's true of anybody else. If you can't find your copy back in July of 2022, I've got the video. Just email me and I can get you the information in order to get the video, and you can play it to your heart's content. But that's the video too, and rightly so, that Dennis Leeds doesn't like, because it's not high quality. I don't have the equipment. I've got a little bit more equipment than I did back then, but this I'm not a production studio that a lot of people who create videos for YouTube have set up in their homes or businesses. And that takes money for a lot of equipment that only has one purpose, to create those videos. That's why some of them have advertising in their YouTube videos to get them some money back. In some cases, they want you to subscribe and be a patron, donating some money, as little as say $10 to help offset a lot of the cost of extra equipment they have to have. They use a professional microphone. They use a separate professional camera, and there's tricks to setting that up correctly to eliminate the glare that is in that video. But all you're doing is you're taking and downloading a distro, as an example, 21.1 of Mint. You're using Rufus or Etcher to put it on the flash drive properly. Then you're booting the computer up off of that drive. Now, in some cases, if you haven't changed boot sequence so that USB drives are the first thing to check out, if it's plugged in and it has a bootable OS on it, you are going to always come up with your internal drive, which you don't want. So the other thing you have to do is look up the make and model of the computer on the internet and find out what the boot menu key is. In some systems, it's the delete key. Some systems, it's the escape key. Some, it's the F9 key, and some, there's F12. It's no standardization, just like BIOS. Trying to show you a BIOS is a waste of time, mostly because all the BIOS are different, even sometimes between computer models within the same maker. I like what Dell did for the most part, but I've got a Dell that doesn't use that normal format. It looks more like the average BIOS setup on some of the computers. And if you bring in more modern computers, the BIOS really goes wacky. You now have two views. You have the basic view and you have the advanced setting view. And the settings are voluminous in a more modern computer. Tell you that right now. I'll also repeat now, I do not agree with dual booting, and I've done it. If you don't know how to recover, that's the headache. Anytime you do a Windows upgrade, like the last one was 22H2, whether you're on 10 or 11, it's going to blow away the grub menu. So you can't get to your Linux distro. You have to have separate tool to boot up off of. You can then try and recover your Linux system and reestablish the grub menu to take over from Microsoft's normal boot up process. And both will work again. But without that knowledge, you're going to think you totally lost whatever you had in the Linux partition, but it's actually still there. It's still viable. You just have to have the right tools and knowledge to recover it. And that information's out there. I've been doing this for quite a while. Bob, I'm sure, has done some of the same thing. And there is more than one tool out there that you can use to achieve this.
Yeah, there's a very good grub repair tool that you boot.
Right.
And you can keep multiple tools on a USB flash drive that's prepared with Ventoy.
Right.
And so you don't have to keep swapping out all your USBs.
Right. And
Ventoy.
one of them for Linux is Bootfix. You download that into your version of Linux, and it can help with various boot options. There are similar tools in Windows, and I'm pretty sure there is in Mac. So I've been out of the Mac for quite a while.
Yeah, I've successfully used the grub repair disk for Linux, and for Windows, I use Macarim Reflect. It does a good job of boot repair.
Yes, but I a lot of times use just the Microsoft stuff.
Sure.
When you know what you're using and doing with it, that works too. But occasionally, all of them fail, even on dealing with some issues of Windows. That's where the backups come in, because you may be forced to either restore a backup or do a clean install and rebuild from scratch.
Yeah, so you do have to know how to back up and verify a backup of Linux.
Right.
And that can involve the same tool you used for Windows, or it can involve different tools.
Right. And I've covered in some past meetings, like RescueZilla, which is derived from CloneZilla. CloneZilla is command line backup tool, which also clones. And RescueZilla is a graphical version of the same thing. Both now also have a verify option, but unlike Macro and Reflect, when you go in to use it, you do the backup first. Then you have to independently do the verify step without removing the media in order to verify the backup was good. Whereas Macro and Reflect, you have the ability to put a check mark in that when it's done with the backup, it automatically does the verification. And if it says, when it's all done, I was successful, I sleep at night.
Yeah, my CloneZilla Live does have an option to verify once the image is created.
Yes, but it's still a command line tool
Yeah.
versus RescueZilla that's basically the same thing, graphical
Right.
wrapper on it.
But if
And
you're gonna do Linux, eventually you'll be in the command line. And as command line tools go, CloneZilla is a little more graphical than most.
Yeah, it's not too bad. I can use it. I've used it for going back more than 10 years. But I right now like so far RescueZilla because it can be a tool for newbies to be able to do a more native style backup without a third party tool from another platform such as Macro and Reflect, which is really designed for Windows. But because you're booting it up off the rescue media, it normally comes up with the restore tab active. If you want to use it to do a backup, you click on the backup tab.
Yeah.
And the options are very limited in that rescue media, but you can do a backup pretty much the same way you do it when it's installed on the actual computer. So it's all doable.
The important thing is, whatever you feel comfortable with, just make sure you have something you will use.
That's the key, especially to backing up. You got to make it a regular habit. At least once a month, you have to update your OS on all the updates. And the funny thing today, this same machine, I did an update of 3 items. Then a little later, it wants another one. I did that. And before coming up on this meeting, I had another single update. So I've had about 5 updates 3 times today alone. Why? Because under Linux, instead of Apple or Mac, Apple or Microsoft, excuse me, they control once a month at most, sending out patches for bug fixes and security updates or announcements of new upgrades of some kind. And so you have that factor. Now, the other problem with this situation is that you have, I'm gonna try and say, a single conglomerate that's controlling when this stuff gets released. Linux doesn't have that. Linux has over 15,000 developers out there worldwide. All of them do different distros, they do libraries, they do whole bunches of other things that are part of some Linux systems. When they say it's ready to go, they release it, and eventually you get notification of an update available for your computer. That means that literally every single day you may get notification that you have 1 or more updates to apply, but usually once a month you'll get the vast majority of them. So if you want to, you can ignore most of the updates that are available under Linux and just do it once a month. You also need to do cleanup at least once a month, getting rid of the accumulated garbage, excess log files you don't need anymore, temporary files. So Linux is great compared to both Mac and Microsoft Windows in getting rid of that kind of junk. Linux doesn't accumulate certain things like Windows and Linux does, but it does do some. That's where I use bleach bit root access in order to be able to clean out a lot of that garbage automatically. Now, is there a single perfect solution? Push one button, it does it all for you? Not that I'm aware of. So you have to do some work, and some work requires you to learn more and use the command line, and some of it now has graphical interfaces that make it life easier. And I hear more and more over the last several years, there are versions of Linux where you can use it just like Windows, that includes Mint, without going to the command line. But the real power in any Linux distribution is the command line, and that's what Bob's trying to bring up. It's a case where you can get a lot more done and quicker with the command line than farting around with the graphical interface. That makes life easier for somebody who's coming from Windows or a Mac operating system to Linux. Easy, okay, but sometimes we take the too easy of a way of doing things, and we don't really learn from it. We just know how to use the easy way and the heck with the extra stuff until all of a sudden you got a major problem, and the only option is using the command line. Then you're stuck. What do you do? If you learn it as you go along, this again gets into the concept of having a running distro of some kind on something, even a flash drive, to be able to play with this stuff, to be able to experiment. What does this do? What does that do? You got to think like a kid, just like you used to be. And kids watch their parents and other adults and other kids, and they pick up on it. That's how their learning process starts. And then you get the more formal education, and you're still listening to adults, watching the adults, and watching other kids and learning more and more. Until you are physically dead for at least a half hour, the brain is functioning as best it can. And there's nothing you can do about it. You can't turn it off. When it turns off, you don't exist anymore. So get used to the fact learning is from a little before you are born to up to several minutes after you your body stops functioning, particularly your heart. And if there's no oxygen, you start having the brain begin to die, but it can take up to 30 minutes before it's totally gone. But you wouldn't want to probably be revived after several minutes unless you're experiencing hypothermia, whether it's natural or man-made induced hypothermia, to slow down that dying process until they correct a medical condition. Don't know what else to tell you on that. All right. I'm going to try and spend the rest of the time tonight on another topic, which is KVM. What's KVM? KVM is a virtual machine environment. And so what? There is Virtualbox, which I've had problems with in the past, and I can only get the 32-bit version free, including it runs on Linux because it's cross-platform. VMware has only one free version, but that's kind of a giant package, relatively speaking, compared to Virtualbox. And their Virtualbox was bought out and owned by VMware. At any rate, you have that. If you're on a Windows machine, if you have the Windows Pro version, whether it's 10 or 11, there is an option of Hyper-V, but it doesn't come activated. You have to go into the old control panel, programs and features. In the upper right side, there's Windows features, turn on, turn off. You click that. It brings up a small box of options. One of them is called Hyper-V. You got to put a check mark in there, say okay. You might have to give administrator's password or okay. You then, it will install anything that's missing that's needed for Hyper-V to work. Then you reboot your computer when it's done, and Hyper-V is available. And Hyper-V is just a virtual machine environment native to Windows Pro. KVM is, to the best of my knowledge at the moment, just for Linux. But there's an irony, there's a wrinkle. KVM itself is just a hypervisor, a graphical interface. What it's using underneath is called QEMU. That's the actual virtual machine. And you have to load all this up at one time, or you have pieces missing and it won't work quite right. And you have to play around getting the missing pieces put in. But once they're in, you'll be just fine. QEM exists, I know, on Windows, but it never has had a great reputation because kind of like VirtualBox, it doesn't play as well with Windows as it should. It is a virtual environment. I don't know if they have a graphical interface on the Windows side. I haven't explored that offhand, but I knew of QEMU probably for 20 years or thereabouts. So it's something that's been around a long time. They keep improving it, just like they keep improving Wine itself to be able to run Windows applications. And it's okay to have Windows applications on a Linux that you can't do without, while you hopefully do research to find alternate Linux-based programs to do the same thing. The bad part, it may not have all the bells and whistles, and it will not look as polished as the Windows program, but you may be able to do everything with the Linux version that you're doing with the Windows, and you don't need to keep the Windows program going. If you want to play games, yes, there is some games on Linux. PlayonLinux supposedly is heavy into running games in the Linux environment, but offhand, whoops, I got two cats here and they're driving me nuts. So pardon me on that. But anyway, the idea is, while you're in the learning situation and trying to do some production, it's okay. Whether you got a single partition installation of Linux versus the multi-partition, which is better, or with the need for some Windows programs to be able to run on a Linux system so that you can have the best of both worlds. You can still run your Windows application the way you're running it, and at the same time too, learn and use Linux more and more. So KVM is a cute little program, and I have the handout, which will give you a lot of the stuff. This is, I'm going to share now my screen. This is an article about how to create the machine. There's articles also in the document how to install KVM on your system. Some of the applications articles do not include one specific piece you're going to need. To get the graphical user interface, you have to make sure that you're a part of the download of installing KVM, includes this particular file. So this has to be in the list of what you're loading into the system. This I do through sudo app install all the files that are needed, including this one if it wasn't included in the article, and everything gets installed perfectly. There is such a thing in Software Manager, but I'm not certain how well it installs everything. So I went the old school route on installing this. It gives you a graphical interface, and this is it. Now this here won't exist when you first bring it up. This is something that person who created the article had installed on their system. And you go through bunches of screens. I'm still playing with it to learn it myself. And I was experimenting a lot. I have a long way yet to go. So this is like a introduction of an idea and feature. This shows loading a Debian ISO, and it has the install capability, but normally speaking, you run it and it looks like a live version that might be on a flash drive that you booted up from. And you can still see the install, and that's what I'm going to go through. So I'm going to stop that share, and I'm going to look. And like I say, this here I will be putting in there. This is the KVM. Here's a material about upgrading to 21.1. Here's KVM material. This one here is the article I just showed you, and a little bit also available for QEM. And I have extra tips here. Tip number 1. I only learned this recently, and I haven't exercised it yet. You have to understand with a virtual machine, what you are doing is sharing the core processors on your system and the memory. You might get by with a dual core and 4 gigs of memory, but it's going to run probably like a dog because you it's going to put one processor for your host OS. It's going to put one core to the guest virtual machine. It will also try and divide your memory. VirtualBox gives you complete control over that. So does this. And you might put 2 gigs of memory to both the host and the virtual machine environment, as an example. For realism, I recommend a computer that has 4 cores and at least 8 gigs of memory, especially if you ever want to run more than one virtual machine at a time. There are people who will take a virtual environment, install Windows, and once that Windows is up, they take a backup copy and they will go out on the internet with that virtual environment. And if it gets clobbered by malware, hackers, bad sites, whatever, you just restore the backup you made and continue on with life. But if you don't have the backup, you don't have the virtual memory manager going, it's a case where you may be exposing your system to that bad problem. And if you want to increase performance, I discovered that instead of like on a regular production, like this machine here, I use ext4. There's also 3, but 4 does some repairing automatically when problems start creeping into your system that 3 will not do. But in reality, they're saying in the virtual environment, you're better off using ext2, which has no journaling, therefore there's no overhead and you get better performance. Also, there's using the host cache and using turning on the write cache feature, especially when you're using VirtualBox. The other one here, next tip is about the Hyper-V that's in Windows Pro for your edification. And distrotest.net looks like it's dead. These are some articles giving you information about alternate sites that you may be able to, through your browser, be able to experiment online with various distros in a learning situation. So getting back here, this is the main article. I'm gonna stop sharing that. And what I'm gonna do now is share the desktop. And I'm gonna minimize these 2. And this one, I'm gonna just close. Sorry about that. Now, I had this totally installed. I know that. I've been playing with it some. It's a real learning curve. But at any rate, in the search box at the top where the cursor is, I just key in VIRTUAL. And the first item is the built-in virtual keyboard. It's on your screen, and if you got a touch screen, you can use that in place of a physical keyboard. This is Virtual Machine Manager. I'm going to launch that. And this is how simple the damn thing looks. But there are issues I still am in the process of researching and learning offhand. But generally speaking, you click this item here for the very first time to create a new machine. And it wants to know, are you getting the information from an ISO or a CD-ROM drive? Are you using a network install, meaning you're going to give an address of an HTTP, HTTPS, or FTP to find the image to download and run the setup of the virtual machine? Or are you importing a virtual machine that's already on disk? And then there's the manual install, which I haven't gotten to, and I got to deal with what I can right now. So I do a forward. I'm going to go up here to browse. I'm going to do a browse local. And in here, I have a few of the Linuxes that are ISO. I got one here. I have a Windows, but the Windows goes through the real install process, and I'm not sure how that's going to work yet. It's an experiment, but I know it's doable. At any rate, I'm going to go here to, this is Linux Mint 21.0. I'm going to click it. I'm going to open it. Now you got to come down here, and I haven't figured out why yet, but basically I got to take out that check mark so I can put something in here. And I'm going to put Mint. It doesn't make a difference. I'm typing something and this pops up. So I'm either using a generic Linux 2020, or I am doing some kind of generic unknown OS. And it doesn't seem to make a difference, at least from my point of view. So I'm going to click on the bottom one. I'm going to click it. Now, this is where you start sharing memory and CPUs. I have 4 cores. So I guarantee you right now, I'm going to share one more. So I have 2 cores. Now for the memory, I've got 8 gigs. So I'm going to tell it use 4096, which is 4 gigs of memory. And I'm going to click forward. Now it wants to create a image file that this is all going to be housed in. Right now, it recommends a 20. Since this is a learning process, I don't care what size it creates. If this is what it wants as a default, I'm perfectly fine, because eventually it'll probably get blown away anyhow. And as I learn more and more, and I'll just make a new one with the amount of space I want. But one of the tips is when you're in virtual machines, do not create big virtual machines. You want to keep them as small as realistic for what you're trying to do. If you don't, they're going to be dogs. They're going to hog up your space, and you're eventually going to be probably an unhappy camper. There is select create a custom storage that I have to experiment with. And this is what I'm hoping eventually will lead me to use an empty special partition I created. But right now I'll leave it the way this is. It's putting it either in the, there's something a little bit later here that I will be showing you. It tells you where it's at. It's in the var folder of the root, which is a place I don't want this stuff. I want just the operating system, the executable programs in root, not in not the virtual machine. I think it's a wrong place, but I got to find out how to get it changed so that it always puts them in this empty area I specially made. So I'm going to go ahead. Now it wants to name it. And right now it defaults to VM1. Well, that's not descriptive enough for me. So I will put in, but you can't leave spaces. put in an underscore, and in this case, I'll put just 21. I could put 21.0, but who cares at this point? And it tells you it's going to be very generic. It tells you that the memory is going to be 4 gigs, 2 CPUs being used. There are some options down here for network. I so far leave it alone, and it's connected to the internet. One area that I still have to explore, this is true on VirtualBox, is USB drives. Only there you have to have a USB drive plugged in before you try and play with that setting. So I'm going through right now, it's putting it out there, and that's how fast this can be. You are not going to see that with VirtualBox or VMware. So I have that there. I'm going to just hit enter. Come on. You were a little faster this morning, but then I wasn't running Zoom on it when I played with it earlier. What you got going on your system affects everything. Trust me. So right now it's trying to load up Linux Mint. I didn't need that in my ear, but anyway, I'm on Ethernet, not Wi-Fi. If I was on Wi-Fi, I would have to set that up. So because I'm on Ethernet, it automatically connects. Anyway, if you look at this screen right now, this is exactly what you would see if you downloaded Linux, use Rufus or Etcher to put it on a flash drive and boot up your computer from the flash drive. This is essentially the exact same image. And I haven't experimented yet because I haven't gotten far enough. But this is what it looks like. And this is the base installation, brand new, like Peter's talking about, putting on his system behind him. That's fine, not a problem. But I don't know what's going to happen if I click this right now. And I'm not going to do it because that's more advanced than where even I am at the moment. It's not going to create a new virtual machine. Same with Windows. It's going to go through the normal clean install process on here within the environment that I have. But if I was trying to do an installation of Windows 10, and by the way, I did try earlier a version of 11.22H2, and it says this machine is not compliant, which is a fact. But I thought I'd try it anyhow, see what happened. But this Linux allotted 20 gigabytes. Trust me, you'll need at least 32 gigs for a tight squeeze for Windows. Again, this is something I'll be playing with in the learning process of learning a virtual machine called KVM. And it does list here QEMU because it's the foundation. The KVM part is the graphical interface here. And this is the actual virtual machine. Now, if I click on this blue eye, this looks a lot like VirtualBox, but there's more categories of things to look at and maybe change for some reason for an individual environment if you got the resources. performance. It's showing you how the performance is. Memory usage is disabled at the moment. I haven't played with it yet to find out how to activate these three categories so that you can see what's going on there. CPU, there's my 2, but I can change it up or down as I need it, or think I need it anyway. It's copying host CPU configuration as pass-through. There's the topology, but right now that's all grayed out because it says it's manual set of CPU topology, and I haven't gotten far enough to understand that yet. So you don't play with it until you do learn. Memory, again, I can adjust up or down the memory that I'm currently using. This is the maximum I set up, but if I don't feel I need all 4 gigs, maybe I reduce this to 3 gigs or something even smaller, like 2 gigs. It's my option. Boot options, where am I booting from is basically what this amounts to. So I've got to get into that more. They call it an IDE disk, even though this is a solid state drive that I'm actually running on. It still thinks it's like an IDE drive. It's 20 gigabytes in size. You got your advanced options that you can tinker with if needed. Then there's the CD-ROM. This unit does have a CD drive, CD DVD drive in it. So if I have a disk, I can put it in and I can play with it. The NEC is basically the Ethernet that I'm running the main host machine on. Tablet doesn't even really apply because I don't have a tablet mode. You need a touchscreen for that. Here's something about the mouse, which you can may be able to alter. I'm not sure about that yet. Keyboard, display. Now here, what you can sometimes do, even in the other, is adjust the size of your display. But in this case here, it's treating it as a server that this virtual machine is talking to, which is the QEMU. But I know there's a way of enlarging this, if need be, to full screen like that. And this is the environment most of us would want to. If I have this down again like that, I should be able to manually adjust the size of my virtual window. So these are all adjustable. This is your sound system, pretty basic. This is serial devices, and technically your the host hard drive, which is an SSD, is a serial device. You have other devices that may be hooked up, like a flash drive, that work as a serial device, etc. So what value you're going to get out of it, I don't know at this point. Channel devices. Again, some devices break up into channels, such as your video. It's just, I have to figure out what it's doing yet. So you have here, I'm using on the video QXL, which I don't know what that means yet, but I have these other options available, including BGA or none. I don't know what I get if I use none. but I am assuming it would be like a headless computer, which means a computer that you access remotely that does not have a working display. It may not have an attached keyboard or mouse. It's the remote software that you use that gives you the functionality of accessing and doing things on that computer. Then you have your controller device, and that's, oops, didn't switch. In this case here, it's USB style, which I am running this whole system from a USB port, a USB 3 port. Then you get into controllers and things like that. It's only showing you under controller PCI devices, which in a virtual environment would have to come from the host anyhow. So you're not likely to see anything there. You have the IDE, which is being treated as the SSD and your CD-ROM, DVD-ROM drive. And you come down, but eventually you get into the USB, and you may not have access to a USB drive. You may have to go in and configure it. I haven't gotten that far to find out if I gotta configure something, but things I have read so far lend me to believe that when I get into here, I have to have a plugged in USB device, and then I can configure it. The rest of what is here, oops. This is, if this is black, a diamond, it's like a lot of our controls, it's to start the virtual machine running. This is to pause the machine or cause it to freeze, and click it again, it should be running again. This is to shut down the virtual machine, but it takes a while. And this gives you a drop down of rebooting to shut down the virtual machine. In some cases, when it won't go down right, you have to do a force reset or a force turnoff. And then there's also a save the image. I haven't figured out where it's storing that yet. This here is if you got a saved version of it, you can then re-access it. So these are just a tip of the iceberg of a virtual environment that instead of being cross-platform and may work okay or may not work okay with your OS of choice, this one's made for Linux, and Hyper-V is made for Windows environment. And I'm sure they've got something like that in the Mac OS as well. But you can still use third-party virtual machines like Virtualbox and VMware, just to name two, and there are others. There are other VMs under Linux also. I haven't researched them. I know of KVM from another Zoom meeting I attended, and I thought it sounded real great. So I've been researching it, and that's why I'm bringing this to everyone's attention tonight. Now, do we have any questions or comments on this? Well, don't everybody talk at once. All right, I don't know what else I can tell you at this time on KVM because I'm still haven't had a lot of time for it. That's my own fault in part. If you're really trying to learn Linux stuff, you should be getting the more FYIs that get emailed out. I've been lately trying to work on trying to get another issue out. I had at least a couple issues last week. They always contain some Linux information, and I don't always cover that information in meetings. So if you want to know what's going on with that stuff, you're going to have to contact Beata at 1ccsadmin@comcast.net and ask to be put on the more FYI list and get the emails. Then you can look at them, pick out whatever the heck you want. You can get Windows stuff out of it, Mac stuff out of it, Linux stuff, security information, small board computers like a Raspberry Pi, etc., and some miscellaneous odds and ends at times. So it behooves you to have it as another resource. But if you don't look at the stuff, you don't invest any time in learning Linux, it would be the same for Windows. If you get the more FYI and the Windows stuff, you do nothing with it, why be on the list in the first place? It's there to give you resources of new things to look at and experiment with. Because I do have one other, and I don't know if I got it up or not, so I got to look. No, I had it up, but I don't have it now. If I launch that and I share that screen, which hasn't come up yet, so I'll do the desktop. Okay. Here's a piece of software for a Linux environment. And I only learned about this this week. And it's this one here. There's actually also a plain folder that has the same name, but this is a PDF arranger tool that allows you to split, combine, and completely edit PDF files. So if you're heavy into using PDF files and trying to make custom documents that are PDF documents, this is something to look at. It's quite viable. But
Yeah, Tim, that's something I use also. What PDF Arranger is allowing you to do is to split, merge, divide out different pages, and rearrange the pages.
yep,
If you want to work on the pages themselves, I would recommend two tools. In LibreOffice, they have Draw,
right.
and in an independent tool is Inkscape.
I've heard of Inkscape too, Ned, but I didn't. I got put off on Inkscape because of some things I either read or heard.
Inkscape is more difficult to learn how to use correctly, but LibreOffice Draw, you can make a text box, you can rearrange all kinds of things, change fonts, and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, I've used Draw in LibreOffice for PDF files before. It is a PDF viewer, and it has some editing capability.
Yeah,
but it seems pretty limited from my standpoint at the moment. But
right.
it's better than nothing.
What I'm saying is with PDF Arranger, when you do separate out pages or a page, you're probably going to be working on just one page at a time, doing whatever edits you're going to do, whatever changes with whatever tools you have. You may even use some of your drawing tools and create images or modify images. And then you put it back together the way you like it. Once you like the page, you put it back in with PDF Arranger.
Right. And that's why I brought up this arranger, and I only picked this information up within the last 2 weeks at another meeting. And that's where I pick up a lot of things. I go to other meetings, not just Linux, Windows too. And I pick up a lot of information from various people bringing up various things in the meetup section, as well as during the meeting and any Q&A at the end of the meeting. So these are, you have to invest in this because it's not that intuitive to be able to use it in a fashion like Windows. Windows is easier to learn that way, and you just learn as you go along to meet your needs. And as your needs increase, there's more you have to learn in the Windows environment. Linux has a reverse curve where you try and learn a lot of the basics up front. That means you have to read things. You have to have some kind of a test environment to try out what you're learning from the documentation or from other meetings. Once you do that, you gain the base knowledge and things start becoming easier to understand and do. But it's a reverse curve of Windows. We all like to do things as simple as possible, but the reality is a lot of things that we really want are not that simple, and you have a learning curve to get what you want. And there's a lot of people right now using this chat GPT that's all over the internet and in academia, and they're trying to figure out how to detect and disallow any material that may have come from a chat GPT session. And sometimes it's easy and sometimes it's not easy. And they estimate right now, I think it was at Stanford, I heard, an estimated 17% of the student population is playing with the chat GPT and trying to pass off papers they are supposed to create. And sometimes it might work, and other times they get a nice big F. And who knows, they might even send such things to administration. In some instances, you might get expelled as well for cheating. Or at least
there's also an upside that educators are finding. They can use Chat GPT and tell students, okay, give it something to do. Let it create a document, a paper, and then critique it, find where it made mistakes. And that is how you convert a student from an F student to a B or an A student.
well,
They learn how to think more critically about everything they read.
and also too, it gives them the opportunity to add their own content on the subject of the paper they're trying to create. That's where they're also showing things they have learned besides correcting grammar errors and stuff like that. One did a test with MBA on a test, and its mathematics were the equivalent of a sixth grader. I don't think that'll do well in an MBA program if you're showing that you only have sixth grader level mathematics understanding. I don't think that's going to fly. So that's where you're going to have to use it as kind of like an automatic outliner, but you're going to have to do a lot of doctoring to it to get it passable. So anybody else got any issues? Because we're coming up 9 o'clock. Go ahead, Peter.
Oh, just, can you hear me okay?
What?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Sure how I learned Linux is
I will, I may not be at the tips and tricks Stanford's meeting next month because I'm being called for jury duty.
Well, I'm on the list. I know what you're talking about, but it'll get posted up on the YouTube channel.
Yeah,
So you
so
can look
if
then.
I'm not there, that's why.
That's fine. Jeff?
Okay, just wanted to share how I learned Linux is little baby steps, just like what you said. You have to work with it and work with it. For me, it was small incremental steps. I took a small class in it. You can hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, okay. I used took a small class in it, used the flash drive, and then went on to the virtual machines, but I found problems with audio and video on the virtual machines. On the timing didn't really work out that well. So then I found that I used these SSD drives and putting them into the USB. And rather than dual booting, I actually loaded Linux onto the SSD drive on the machine that I was going to use. Then I could use the boot command to either boot into that drive or it didn't bother the Windows drive at all. Worked fine for me. And then I did step by step, first finding out, which route to go and doing one little thing, learning about LibreOffice, how to replace Office with it, step by step. And then finally came the day that I blew out Windows, used Linux. Still occasionally I run into something, but there's so much software out there. There's so much control on it, and you don't have the licenses to deal with, that it was well worth the effort that it took to do. But you're 100% correct. There is a learning curve. There is some time involved, but it's easily doable. If you do it in baby steps, one little thing at a time, learn it well, get a tool in your belt, and then move on.
Okay, now, one thing I'm going to do now is I'm going to open up the chat. Nobody posted anything anyhow, so I guess we had nothing to do. And hang on a minute. I got to find what I'm looking for. And let's see here. Documents. Okay. Here's, I didn't ask you to open up. Boy, this thing's dumb. Okay. Count. Really? I'm trying to get this thing. Some of the good. Hang on a minute. I'm trying to get that document out. I've got one other one. I got it on a different machine, and I'll have to play with it. Let's try this again. That's crazy. I've got something here. I don't want to reply, and I don't want that.
Same thing. We've got it out there twice now.
Yeah. Do you see the PDF? Because that's what it should be. But for some reason, this thing's giving me a headache.
Okay, you have something that is doc. Then after that, you have SIG 01 2023 PDF twice.
Right.
I'm gonna try and do this from a different machine that I'm logged into. I don't have the video. So I'm gonna get out of this chat here and get into the other machine and try and do basically the same damn thing. I'm a little bit tight on cord space. Let's see what I can do here. I've never run into that problem before. The PDF does show on my Windows machine. So in the chat, there are two, the last two entries have a PDF that should be downloadable.
Yeah, and they're the same file, right?
That's correct. It's the same thing. You only need one of them. This
Okay.
is all the material for tonight's meeting. Now I've got one other file I gotta try and find, and this is for people who haven't gotten off the fence yet. And this is something I came across fairly recently. Let's see if I remember where it's at.
I can't get it to download.
My first speculation is, since you're on a Linux machine, that may be why. I'm not sure, because I was having things appear in chat that I've never seen before. It actually says there's administrative rights or something. And I don't have time to debug it here and now.
Just a moment. I may, in fact, have succeeded. Let's get into saved meetings.
Shoot.
Yeah, worked for me. Under Mint. It did download.
Yeah, mine has like a little hand pointing to it, but it won't, nothing happens.
Well,
Oh.
it should. It should. Go ahead.
It should say click to download when you hover the little hand pointer over it. And then on that click to download, you click the click to download. And then it turns into a green check mark.
No,
And then it says click to open.
I don't get any, I don't get that. I just like a little hand on the download, but nothing happens.
I'm finding the same thing on Ubuntu. I get the hand, click on it, and nothing happens.
Yeah,
If I go to the three little dots by it and hit download, again, nothing happens.
And you have the Zoom in which version on your machine?
Where would I find that?
I don't even remember mine anymore.
Yeah, it's been just updated about a week ago.
Okay, that should be fine.
Yeah, I have 5.13.4 and it looks goofy on mine.
513, let's see, is mine 513.4 or 5? Let me get my gear and my stats. I have 513.5.431.
I got
And that works.
5.9.1.
5.9 may not work.
Yeah. The older the version is, the more likely you're going to have problems. Now, hang on one second here.
I couldn't get it to upgrade this afternoon. Every time I try to do it, it wouldn't complete.
It worked in mine on Windows.
It worked in mine on Mint.
They work differently, period. Bottom line is you are only downloading in Linux the Zoom module .deb into your download folder.
Yeah,
And
that's what I did.
You have to right click on that, whether it's a line or an icon display of that module you downloaded. And the first entry is to use GDEBI to
Right.
do the installation. You click on that and it goes through the install process.
And GDebi will run for a while. Then it will let you know that it did install successfully, or it will tell you why it did not.
Now I'm loading up another one that's a little over 3 megabytes in size. When it appears on yours, it's a PDF document. It's an ebook. Linux in 5 days. I'm going to leave it at that. But basically, it's the basics of learning Linux. I just got.
Okay.
I just
3.5.
Yeah, 3.45
Okay.
megabytes.
Yeah. Okay, let's put it in here. Down there. Okay, works for me.
Okay, so
Work-
you guys are
works
going to
for
have
me.
to. Pardon?
It worked for me.
Do you have both?
I have both.
Good. I got 2 now that got both. How
Yeah.
about you, Ted, Dennis, Wayne, and Jeff?
No, I can't, it won't download.
No, same here. I couldn't download. What was it? You said it had to be installed for to
Mine
download?
Mine just finished. It took a while. It just finished though.
On a slower machine, it may take a little while.
Dennis, on do you have both documents or just one? Wait a minute, I can't hear
Muted.
you.
Dennis, unmute.
Press your space bar. You got to press and hold the space bar to talk.
Hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I did get the second one, Linux, in 5 days, but it did take a long time. It
Well,
was
it's a bigger
fine
file.
for a long time, but it downloaded.
Do you have the previous file, the PDF file for tonight's material?
Correct, I do.
Okay, so I got 3 people. So that leaves Wayne, Jeff. Nobody cares about Bert because he's only Windows. Ted, did you have any success?
Where did it download it to? I was looking at my download folder.
That's where it should put it. Both
Okay.
of them.
Yeah.
There is a second possibility. Zoom may download into the Zoom folder.
No.
That's a possibility too. So you have to find your where your Zoom folder is in the document folder. Open it up to find these downloads. Ted, did you get the 2 downloads?
I have the chat from the meeting in that download folder in the Zoom folder, but can't download the PDF.
Repeat that again.
I've got the chat saved in the Zoom folder, and I see that it did download that, but I can't download the document.
Okay.
Huh.
Ted, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
No, you
Did
guys
you-
lost me.
Did
on
you,
this.
in the chat, did you see the 2 documents and download it? Chat is at the bottom of the screen. It says chat underneath it. You click it to open it up. And then you should see the last 2 entries, CCS SIG 01-2023.pdf.
From you.
And,
Yeah.
okay, that little blue button with a down arrow, click that and you'll get the document downloaded into your computer. Do the same thing on the second one that says Linux in 5 days. It's a PDF, and you click on the little green button with a check mark.
Okay.
Click those 2 and you should get the both of them to download. The last one will take longer than the other one.
Got one.
Okay, the other one takes a little bit of time, depending on your speed of your system. So that leaves Wayne and Jeff that's got an issue.
Yeah.
Believe I got it.
Okay, that means everybody but Jeff and Wayne got it. Wayne,
Yeah.
you may be so out of date on Zoom, that's causing your problem. I need to update a little bit. Jeff, I'm not sure, but you may be too out of date. You probably need that 5.13.5 version. But that's aside from the point. I'll have to send you two these documents via email.
Probably anything 5.12 or higher will work.
Don't know. It's supposed to, because it's supposed to be automatic updating on Windows. I don't know if it's automatic updating on Linux.
No, it's not doing it.
Zoom does not automatically update on my Linux.
No.
Yeah. So you have to manually do it just like we used to do on Windows. Windows is supposed to be updating itself. It leaves the old last version number out there. It doesn't show the current number it's actually at. But there's an automatic feature that's built into Zoom on Windows, at least, that is always giving you the latest updates automatically. All right.
I've got four downloads because I tried 4 different times today and none
Yeah,
of them.
but you only need one. The last one you did, like I say, right click on it, and the first entry is GDebi. Click that, and it'll do the install. But I don't know what it'll do while you're
Okay.
online.
No, I won't do it online. No.
And the other 3, you can just delete them and be done with it. Any
Yeah.
other?
That's another thing that'll happen in both Linux and Windows. You will accumulate these updaters, these
Yeah.
update installers. You want to get rid of each one of them because they don't distinguish which one is which.
Absolutely correct. So whatever the highest number one is probably the last one you did. Install it, and then take all 4 of them and delete them.
That's what I'm doing right now.
But I don't know if it'll install while you're on Zoom.
No, I'm not gonna, no, that's not gonna work.
Linux does things that shouldn't work, but do, because what it does, a lot of times it installs the stuff. It just doesn't activate it until you restart the computer. I mean, if I update any of my versions of Linux right now with new updates, they just sit there. And if in some cases they're active and live right now, in other cases I have to reboot to get some of the updates to take effect. And Zoom may be one of them that either you reboot, or when you get out of Zoom, it will automatically have the new version.
On my system reports, it says there's no problems were detected. And then when I go to system information, I've only got 20.3.
You got the old 20.3, and we went through the update a long time ago. There's a script to download. You got to run that script.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you can't move up automatically. It's almost a case where you have to blow away what you got and reinstall the latest, greatest version. So you have to get the script. You can check the Linux on YouTube. It should be out there on how to upgrade it, and the script and so forth, where you get it from. Run it, get up to 21. When 21 is fully updated, then you take the you should go to the systems reports, and it should tell you you got a new update available, 21.1 Vera, and then update that, and you're up to date. until the next updates come through. Yeah. That could be,
And that's apparently what my problem is. It says that there's an update available. I downloaded it on 512x6, and apparently I'm a few sessions behind.
okay, you're like Wayne then. There's a video out there that I went through. You get the script made and it works great. It tells you how to use it. And at the same time too, Debian is adapting, at least in part. I don't know what Ubuntu has in mind, and I don't know if this works at all on any of the other Debian-based distros, but it works on Mint because Mint created it. And it worked perfectly fine. And again, I have experimental stuff I test this stuff with, and the video demonstrates the whole process, but I can't show you every detail. But once it got going, I think it took I'm going to say like about an hour or so, and it was successful.
There's
But it
a,
was-
there's a website here that shows you how to upgrade to Linux Mint 21 from 20.3.
Yeah, well, that's what the video I created in a Linux meeting is all about. But
Yeah.
there's things in the video that are not that obvious in doing it. So I suggest, besides the article, you also go look at that video. I think it was October, but I'm not positive. So look at September, October, November Linux SIG videos and go through that, and you'll get a good handle along with the article of actually doing it. And Jeff, you're probably in the same boat. You cannot ignore updates, upgrades, even though most of these versions will go up to 5 years. I say up to 5 years without doing the major upgrades. But it's better to have gone through the updates like 20.1, 20.2, 20.3, and the major upgrade, like the script takes you from 20.3 to 21. It just works, and it keeps you up to date. It gives you any new features that have been added you would not get staying with the old version. But I'll have to send you, Wayne, and Jeff the 2 articles you can't download because your Zoom is behind besides the operating system, and one of the 2 may be causing the problem. The problem I was noticing on my Linux machine might be because I'm at 21, not 21.1, and I'll be doing the upgrade to it, but I wanted to show you the message in systems report when 21.0 is totally up to date. You get that message, you click on the button, and it'll take you from 20.0 to 21.0 to 21.1. Vanessa to Vera. Anything else? We're almost 9:30.
Yeah.
But this is what you got to do. This is Linux. Some of the same rules apply whether you got Windows or Mac OS. When you don't update your machine on a regular basis, bad things can happen, and you're scratching your head wondering what's going on. Why doesn't this work? Why doesn't that work? Or you start running into issues that you may end up having a hosed up machine at some point. And again, if you don't have good backups once a month, you're dead as a doornail. you may have to do a clean install and rebuild the whole system. And whether it's Windows, Linux, or Mac OS, it don't matter. These things are not the computers you see in Star Trek or in Babylon 5 and in what's the other one? There's another program made in Canada. Name escapes me right now. It's a starship that's supposedly like 10,000 years into the future. And it has total virtualization. You talk to the computer all the time. You don't use necessarily a keyboard per se. So you got to keep it up. And by the time we get totally automated systems, we'll all be long gone. Trust me, it ain't gonna happen anytime soon. So you've got to get on the stick, and I try and let you guys know about these things. That's why I started it off with updating to 21.1 Vera from presumably being on 21. And 21 was gotten to from 20.3. I don't know what else to tell you, guys. This is how
things that have made it easier. I remember a session a while back, you introduced me to RescueZilla, which I did use CloneZilla, but RescueZilla is so great. It's clone a drive. You've got a bootable backup where you've got, if something goes wrong, you can switch out the drive and be done. That's the biggie.
That's true. I use it. So far, I haven't had to do a restore, but I've got several backups with RescueZilla. I could, like Bob, I could use CloneZilla because even though it's command line, I've used it as far back as at least 10 years ago.
And I can vouch for CloneZilla. It does restore. And there have been times when I've been playing around with stuff like Linux Sound or some driver or another, and I got myself deeply into, dog, you know what, and I decided, okay, easiest thing to do, take 10 minutes, put it back the way it was.
Right, and I have similar face in RescueZilla because it was essentially a version of CloneZilla with a graphical wrapper. That's all it is. That's what it's. Linux is a multitasking DOS environment that people have made graphical representations of desktops, graphical wrappers around DOS-based programs, and that's what really CloneZilla is. It takes the source code of CloneZilla, puts a graphical wrapper around it, calls it RescueZilla, and gives you a graphical tool to use instead of having to do it all through the command line. This is life. I mean, it's a learning process, and you got to play with this stuff to learn it, because there is no magic pill. There's no other way of learning this stuff and getting anything accomplished.
And the other thing I would like to suggest, you get into habits when you use Linux as your everyday workhorse. And my habit is when I get up, when most people would be having that first cup of coffee, I'm going to be doing updates. I'm going to do my email downloads, and I'm going to clean up after the updates. And then I'll reboot and see what broke. Usually not anything.
Well, that's not necessarily a bad practice. It varies person to person. I'm lucky with some of the people I try and help on Windows to get them to do maintenance once a month, a few days after patch Tuesday. If they didn't get the patches automatically installed, they go check the Windows Update, get their updates. Then you start the cleanup process of getting rid of a lot of the debris. and maybe a little tuning and tweaking on top of it, and then take a full image backup and go.
And don't forget to keep your software up to date,
Well, the software is part of the maintenance side.
other than Windows. I call that update, not
well,
maintenance.
Well, that's after you do the Microsoft update check.
Yeah.
Then I run patch my PC. You run
Right.
sumo, and then I do all the cleanup of junk out of the system. I don't use one tool. I use 3 tools at least, and then I
Yeah.
do a little tuning, which also does a little cleanup. Why? Because a lot of software in the utility section are designed by different people. These people
Yeah.
have different perspectives of what is garbage, what is trash, and how much they know of the operating system. So the end result is one tool, the first one you use, gets the majority of junk, but the other ones find more junk that the other didn't find. And the third tool finds more still. And the tool that I use for a little bit of tuning and tweaking finds even more stuff on top of that. So one size does not fit all when it comes to maintenance of a Windows system.
And the same could be said of malware detection. There
Yeah.
is antivirus and there are other tools.
Right, like Malwarebytes as an example. Or,
And Ad Cleaner,
yeah, Super Anti-Spyware is another one.
it'll work.
They all do things above and beyond basic AV programs in finding and cleaning out viruses that it finds. Malwarebytes is the best. There's a few things I go through with people that you have to know about, because we did a South Suburban meeting in December, and I had a guest presenter, and he showed extra things in CCleaner, and
Yeah.
most of them I was doing, but one thing I didn't do was make the changes he suggested in the configuration, which you do one time, and then after you've done that, you go through at least 3 different sections to be able to clean out as much stuff as possible. Then I use Glare Utilities to do more cleanup. I use sometimes Slim Cleaner on some systems. I also use Advanced System Care in Windows as a last step, because it does cleanup and it does some tuning if it finds the need for it. Also, if you're missing any of the Windows updates, and I've had a few systems that did have at least one missing module, it will download it and install it automatically. So there's lots of ins and outs to that Windows to have a good, smooth running system with the leanest thing. The other thing that I haven't gotten into, it's on my list to get into, is bloatware. There's 2 ways of dealing with bloatware. You either modify the installation media before using it, or you use tools after the fact, and you better have a full image backup before you run it, because some people have run into problems where it took out too much and caused a big problem. But you can slim down Windows quite a bit by using the bloatware type application. It's just 2 different ways of doing it, but this is Linux, not Windows.
Now,
Anything?
Bob, you mentioned that you do the updates daily. So you actually pull the updates? On Ubuntu, I tend to wait until it says that there's updates available.
Well, in Mint, you have a handy little shield, and it changes from all black to half white, half black if you have any possible updates.
Yeah,
And you can just click on it when it comes up, hit the refresh button, and that'll have the same effect.
yeah,
Okay.
If there are any, they'll show.
that's right. It's very similar to Ubuntu in that respect. It's just a case where we try and focus on Mint so that we're all talking apples and apples, not apples, oranges, and tomatoes. So that's why we are focused on the Mint. APCUG used to do quite a few different distros and now is focusing on Mint as well.
Yeah, I can also say one more thing. Two more things. In Ubuntu, you may have two different ways you want to cross-check. They have a software updater and they have a software center that shows any updates.
Right.
It has a tab. If you use Flatpak, it'll have another update thing you do in command line. And snaps are covered by the software center. And some Flatpaks are covered by the software center, but not every one. So focusing on Mint, you really only have the one thing you need to worry about.
Right. It'll take care of everything, including the Flatpaks. They discourage using Snap. It doesn't stop you from installing Snap and using Snap packs on a Mint installation. But if you run into problems, they're yours.
I've never found anything that I wanted as a snap in Mint so far after, 3/4 of a year.
No, that's fine. To each their own. If you want to bite the bullet and try it out, that's your wish. But at the same time, you may create problems. You better have backup images or you're going to be cooked at some point in time. Anyway, Flatpak seems to be the better idea. That's why the developers of Mint try and impress Flatpaks over snaps.
Yeah, it just depends on which distro you've got. Ubuntu, because they integrate Snap, it's just simply there.
Yeah.
With Mint, since it isn't there, don't force fit it.
Yeah,
Don't shoehorn it in.
And even under Ubuntu, if you want to, you can ignore the snaps and do Flatpaks, but you have to install Flatpaks first. Then you can get Flatpak packages and install them.
There are a few exceptions. You have to do a real Texas two-step if you don't want Firefox to be a snap in Ubuntu.
I'll agree with that, but there's other issues similar to that as well. That's why this is experimentation and learning. I can't overemphasize this, folks. This is life is a contiguous learning situation to begin with. A computer is a very advanced tool. And if you think of power tools, you go out and get a power tool, like a circular saw. If you don't read up on how to properly use safely that circular saw, you may be cutting off your fingers or your hand. If you don't care about that, so be it. Computers are even worse. There are so many ways of doing the same thing. It's not funny. None of them's wrong. Some are just more efficient. And bottom line is, especially in Linux, you can go, and there's some jackasses that are out there. They might try and get you to bring up the command terminal, and they'll give you a command, and you totally wipe out your system. Isn't that a laugh? They laugh their ass off that you were gullible enough to listen to what they were saying.
And I have had it happen, and I've seen it on a website. Now I've gotten a little bit more knowledgeable, but there are websites that give you bad information out there, which is kind of sad. And you mentioned the Firefox. being
It's
a,
it's not as bad anymore. But when I go back in time to the late 1990s and early part of this century, being a newbie at the time, and it was difficult getting a system up and running to begin with. If you asked a newbie question, the first thing you get is RTFM. Read the fucking manual. And that's all the help you get. Or they will flame you, trying to embarrass you and get you to go away. That's unfortunate, but it's less and less and less over the years. Most of them either have shut up or have changed their attitudes to help people out more than to diss them and make them feel bad and feel like they're not wanted.
well, that's why there's more and more groups like this that have a positive outlook to help you actually do things.
Well, there's a lot of groups out there. I'm dead serious when I say that try and do the same thing. If you watch the CCS announcements for APCUG, usually the third Wednesday, except next month, there's a Linux workshop, and they talk about a lot of things. Their video is up on YouTube. You can go look at those videos. They are between 2 and 3 hours long, and they're loaded with all kinds of information if you just listen. Then you got to play with what information you picked up that was struck a chord with you, and actually be on a working environment and exercise what you picked up. And if you stumble, you keep trying. You got to have persistence and patience with computers. Think of the computer as a toddler. What is it like to have a toddler? It's constantly, what's this? What's that? How does this work? How does that work? Et cetera, et cetera. You got to live with it. That's what it is with computers when you're learning something new. Anything else anybody needs to cover? It's getting past my bedtime. Of course, my bedtime was before the meeting started, but that's beside the point.
It's coming up on dinner time here.
Yeah, well, make sure you save some for me too.
I'm an hour later than Chicago, so guess how late it is here.
I know. You're looking at 10:40 right now.
And I have a meeting in the morning.
Oh,
Yeah. Well, so do I, but mine isn't until 11 o'clock Central, APCUG. And there's also a group in New Jersey, BCUG. They talk Linux. And boy, well, I was at the last one. I haven't been able to get to too many of them. I think it's on the third Wednesday evening. No, second Wednesday evening. And they went over a one-time shot of playing with a new distro of Linux called Vanilla. If you want to warp your mind, grab a copy, put it on a separate drive, and see what it's like. It's all containerized. It gives you high security, but boy, it's got a lot of gotchas. I saw this guy go for 2 hours trying to play with that thing just to get it loaded up and run one time. So that's this is how you learn. I don't think I'd be ready for vanilla for quite some time myself. And most of you here, except for maybe Bob, I'd say don't even think about vanilla. Go for pistachio or chocolate, Rocky Road, something like that. Leave vanilla alone. At any rate, I think unless there's something else, we need to call it quits. I've got the video to put up. I'll have to send the files to Wayne and Jeff and go from there.
Very good.
Well,
Okay,
with that, I'm gonna say aloha from over here.
okay. I'll say goodnight to
Oh,
everybody and hope everybody has enough time to go over the 2022 material I sent everybody. And I also want you to go over the material I'm giving you tonight. It's the only way you're going to start getting somewhere with the stuff. Otherwise, you're really wasting your time, I guess is the best way to put it. All right, I'm going to end it now. Everybody have a good night.